putting thicker armour on a tank, you just need enough armour to stop the penetration by the standard anti-tank gun that would be firing at it. When the British start bringing in the 6-pounder, and again after 1941, the summer when the tanks are going into the Soviet Union for the Germans, that's when they start adding extra armour. We know this vehicle was set to go to North Africa because it's stamped TP trophy. That means they tropicalised this vehicle. They gave it extra filters on the back to cut out some of the dust that was flying around in the desert, and some small little adjustments that were made. Our Tiger, of course, Tiger 1.1, that was tropicalised as well. It's got these bigger Feifel air filters on the back again to cut out the desert dust that will be fighting. It's actually got some battle damage on it. There is on the front sprocket, the holes obviously been shell fire, that's actually penetrated the front sprocket. Again, drivers vision board, it's got a snap on it, that was retained there. We've got photographs of this vehicle, debombed, that were taking all the ammunition out. Like contemporaries, if you look at them, the Hargo is first designed in the early 1930s by a Japanese designer called Tommy O'Hara, and he's put together a faster tank for the Japanese military that goes into service in the second half of the 1930s, and it's very successful for the Japanese because there's very little armour or anti-tank weapons to fight against it in the places it's fighting, places like China, Manchuria, and then of course later the Pacific Islands. What we're looking at there is relatively thin armour, Mitsubishi diesel engine. The Japanese had the experience, they imported a British tank in the 1930s. When they trialled it, it caught fire and badly burnt some of the crew. Diesel is harder to burn than petrol, so the Japanese went down the diesel route. They thought it was a better way of going. 37mm anti-tank gun in the turret. It could fire armour-piercing or high explosive. 3-man crew. You've got a commander in the turret on his own. He's got a machine gun facing forward in the front hull and a machine gun on the back of the turret, slightly facing backwards. And as he drives past you, you'll be able to see it's got an armoured barrel on M3, M4, which one's which, etc. So he wants them to be given names. So it's the British military that come up with the idea of naming them after Civil War American generals, hence Jeff Stewart. That's what the Stewart tank's named after. Now, a bit of a rarity on now. This is the only one left of these tanks. This is a Valentine DP tank. It's privately owned by John Pearson. John Pearson, this tank basically with its turret cut off, was in the cellar of a factory that used to make tanks in the Second World War. John managed to acquire it, and over the years he's restored it back to running order, and he's put back on it what looks like a canvas sausage around the outside. That is actually the screen that would be raised to make this Valentine a floating tank. Nicholas Straussler, countries helping keep the communist Russia going in the war, but Valentine tanks were used and they were liked by the Russians because they're relatively reliable. Now, a couple of American tanks coming on now, and a tin destroyer. Careful what I say here, isn't it? So, we've got a Sherman there. We've looked at the Sherman earlier, or we will see some more Shermans in a moment. But following it is the M18 Hellcat. Now, the Americans in 1941, they finally decided to reform an armoured corps after much debate. They did away with the armoured corps after the First World War. They're going to reform it, but they want that armoured corps to be the force, a bit like the Panzer divisions that's going to be doing the breakouts. The problem of how you counter enemy tanks coming the other way, there's much debate about, do we have towed anti-tank guns spread out in the front line, or do we put an anti-tank gun on some sort of chassis that can quickly go to where there's an enemy breakthrough with all the enemy tanks coming? Ends up with a 76mm gun in it, same as on our Fury Sherman, and it's supposed to be an ambush weapon. So in other words, if the enemy tanks are attacking, you rip your tank destroyers as fast as can be, 55 miles an hour that vehicle would do on the open road. That's quick for a tank or an armoured vehicle like that. You shoot those vehicles straight to where they're needed, ambush the enemy. That was the theory. Of course, everyone then quickly realised in practice it doesn't really work. So even though this M18 gets to Europe, maybe a Russian tank, the T-34, this model of it is an improved version that was done during the war, the 85mm gun. All the early models have a 76mm gun, hence T-34-76, in this case T-34-85. Designed out in Russia, of course, by Koshkin, who's the designer for a rival factory to the designers who have just made the KV-1, big heavy tank. The Red Army is taking that into service. Koshkin comes up with an alternative design. He puts it forward. Most of the Red Army are not that bothered until Stalin gets wind of it, politely coughs and says, you are going to be interested in this. And of course, Red Army comes and says, we absolutely love the idea of the T-34. Simple design in many ways. Early models are quite sophisticated. They have to move the factories that are making these tanks out of the way of the advancing German military behind the Ural Mountains. That's when they start simplifying them, getting rid of superfluous items, making the guns so much quicker, and doing things in wartime that leads to more mass production. And that T-34 after 1943, they meet the Panther. They're looking at these tanks with a view, are we going to build a brand new model? They design one, they call it the T-44, or do we carry on evolving what we've already got in the factories? And quite sensibly, they say, no, we're going to carry on evolving our T-34 tank. We're just going to put a bigger turret on it, get more room for the crew, bigger gun, and that becomes the T-34-85. So it's a classic Second World War tank. Lots of people pro it, lots of people say, well, hang on a second, is it really as good as everyone says it was? Sloped armour, wide tracks for that eastern front, very few metal roads out there. But don't forget, the T-34 is also the tank that was most knocked out in World War II. So it's pretty rough if you're a tank crewman. And again, in the West, we tend to accommodate different size crew members. In Russia, basically, if you're 5'8" or above, you're too big for a tank. You're going to get the small guys inside like that. Now, out at the same time, we've got our Chaffee and a Comet. Now, the Chaffee is a replacement. We saw earlier the M3, the Stuart tank. They come up with a new model of that, the M5. But the Chaffee is the tank that they end up building towards the second half of the war. 75mm gun. That gun, by the way, was originally designed for a So there you've got in that future engine, plenty of power, a good gun, and relatively thin armour protection for a British tank at this stage of the war. The Comet, it starts getting to France.
First time, every time. That was taken to be as a magnitude of intensity of burst into flames. Now, you can see now a number of different Shermans. On the whole, the main difference between them is the engine they've got pushing them around. Just about every sizable engineering company in America has turned over using armaments as soon as America knew it was going to enter the war. Those factories didn't have necessarily the same factories, different factories using different engines. A2. This is the one with the double diesel at the back there. Our particular version here, Fury, became Fury because it had been adapted, it had been retrofitted, as I was saying. Originally, the A2 would not have had the horizontal balloon suspension, and it wouldn't have had the 76mm gun you can see on there. Right? These things were fitted retrospectively. The suspension gave a much better ride, and the gun was much more capable of dealing heavy German. When the filmmakers came to us to ask for running vehicles, we couldn't give them an 88, which is what we were supposed to be filming. We could give them an 82, he's aiming at 83. We couldn't give them an 82, which looked like an easy 8. Now, the next one on the minibot there is the A4. This is the one that most Brits went to war in. In the back there, it's got the Chrysler multi-back engine. That is 5 car engines bolted together around a single drive shaft. 30 cylinders. Now, if that sounds complicated, it's because it is. The Americans didn't really like it very much. It became the basis of Lend-Lease. The Brits, on the other hand, quite liked it. You can tell a multi-bank engine Sherman if you're really, really good, because it is actually slightly longer than the standard size. Now, that was longer because of the multi-bank. The Sherman as a whole, and you can see it again as Fury comes around, the Sherman as a whole was quite a high vehicle because the initial there in your engine compartment that actually fitted the engine in there. That explains why originally the Grant tank, subsequently the Sherman tank, is actually quite high off the ground. If you were in any other Allied tank, by improving ammunition storage and by adding a PKI on the outside, they did manage to deal with some of the early problems. So, I'm going to pass over now to my colleague Stuart, who's going to tell us a little bit about these two impressive beasts stood up on the box.
Thank you, Tim. What we have here is the M50 in the blue, and behind it the M51, the Super Shermans. So basically, what you have after World War II is, in 1948-49, basically Israel is fighting for its independence. It is using existing Shermans that they can get hold of. They get hold of about 30 from scrapyards, obsolete sources, this type of thing. And they're fighting against the Arab states, Egypt, Syria, these types of countries, and basically fighting for survival. And the Syrians and Egyptians are also using Shermans, they're using Panzer IVs, etc. And so it's quite a battle of obsolete tanks. After this War of Independence and the State of Israel being formed, they start to look at what types of tanks they can get for themselves. So they focus really on Sherman, and they're looking at effectively making sure that they can basically maintain and logistically supply them. They start to look to see if they can do what happened with the Firefly and Afghan. They realise that the Egyptians and the Arab stuff are getting better models, they're getting the 234-85, they're getting design of the Panthers gun, the L-17.
Guys, we're going to asking everyone to go away from the wall towards the grass there.
Basically, they're fitting that gun into that turret, and that's what they're trying to do. It's an M4A4 hull with a turret on. It was actually given to the French
This is a particular model, post-war period, and what happens is they have to make sure they can get that gun in there. The other thing that the French have done is they've made it an auto-fitting that gun inside that turret. What they did with the 105 as well is put a short on the barrel, or 1.5 metres. They added a double barrel baffle muzzle brake on it. They reduced the chamber size, and they fitted that in. What they're also doing is they're strengthening the shields and the magnums at the front. The other thing they have to do with the 105 gun is basically, you've got a problem. That's a rifle gun. The best ammunition they've got for it is the heat high explosive anti-tank round with a shaped charge on it. What you can't really do with shaped charges is have them spinning, otherwise the process doesn't work properly. So what they came up with was a gyro stabiliser on the round.
Rubber plantations, the difference between the rubber trees in Malaya, because we're starting the Cold War from Britain, end of empire, they're still thinking about how they're going to have to get vehicles around the world, air portable if need be, if you're firing an infantry in the open, or they can fire squash head, and that pancakes against the enemy tank to blow up. It's got the Jaguar E-type car engine in there. It was the only engine powerful enough they could find to fit the vehicle. Now the second vehicle is the AMX-13. The AMX-13 was an air-portable tank designed by the French just after World War II. It ended up being sold to what turned out to be 22 countries. We're looking at the Leopard 1 at the back on the mound there. That Leopard 1, German-designed vehicle. First of all, they were going into operation with the French. They fell apart. The French built the AMX-30. The Germans put that 105mm gun on. And ironically as well, we've also got that Type 59 made in China from plans from Russia. Even that has got the L7 gun on because it's a model that was touted around the world. Instead of buying the original 100mm gun that was made in China, why not upgrade your tank to this new 105mm gun? So with tanks sometimes, when we look at them, we see them in the round, what they're really all about is how you get that gun to the right position and how you fire the right type of ammunition onto a target. And doing that, that's the tank's role. Yes, it's big and impressive otherwise, but accuracy, gunfire power, that 105mm gun was so impressive, it made the earlier Conqueror tank, it made the American 103 gun. So I mentioned earlier the Scorpion's got the engine in from the Jaguar E-type sports car fleet around the world. 13. It starts life with a 75mm gun, goes on to a 90mm, and they even fitted, you can buy a version with that 105mm gun on. It has an oscillating turret. The gun is basically wedged into the top half of the turret. The whole top half of the turret can move up and down. The bottom half is a separate piece, and that then sits at the top of that ANX-13. Now the Centurion, as I mentioned, we sold it to Switzerland. They wanted them in 1950. The Korean War began. We had to use them in the British forces, Commonwealth, other NATO countries. Only in 1955 did we start selling Centurions to the Swiss military. This particular one, it was upgraded later. They bought more Centurions from South Africa. When South Africa stopped being a colony, they ended up getting rid of some of their Centurion tanks at the time. So that's got that 105mm gun in. So it was upgraded. Small differences to the ones in British service. The smoke dischargers, the machine gun, etc. were adapted for Swiss Army use. Because of the delay in buying the Centurion, they ended up starting a program to make their own tank in-house. And that led to the second tank. Germany, after the Second World War, in 1955, the West German Bundeswehr is set up again for the first time. They're allowed to form an army. The first kit they use is mainly donated American tanks, but they start a program with the French to build a new tank. The French and the Germans fall out. The French do the AMX-30. The Germans come up with a Leopard 1. You can see with this vehicle what the great example now, T-72, one of those tanks built as part of a family of vehicles out in the Soviet Union. T-54, then the T-62, the T-64, and this one, the T-72. And they were sold all around the world with the view you have bought them with English writing inside. They thought the Chinese saying English is the best thing. Good example of that Soviet frying pan shaped turret, it's called. Nice ballistic shape to try and deflect rounds and make sure that whatever angle your incoming round is beating something that's nice and thick. Now this particular battle, their allied countries were allowed to have into service, and of course we're seeing these T-72s now out in the Ukraine being used, as we were saying earlier, not particularly well, vulnerable on their own, without infantry support, and what looks like very poor logistical support keeping them going as well. Now the Americans after the Second World War, they built the M26 dispersing tank and use that as a basis for building on a longer tank that's going to be called the pattern tank. F-47 and F-48. With this version, the M60 basically got into the 1980s by the Abrams, it's still used around the world. Now, Britain's lesson from the Second World War, we went the other way from the Germans. We said, no, we don't want to be knocked around again by big German tanks. Big Russian tanks. We're going to put lots of thick armour on our vehicles, and that means to the chieftain that when it goes into production, we've got some of the thickest armour, well, it's the best protected tank in the world at the time, and we're going to give it a whopping rate, 120mm.
Very impressed by the ability and the stealth. Listen to that ferret. Very quiet. They were very impressed by the ferret. But one thing, as far as they were concerned, it lacked firepower. They came up with in 1960 their version of the slightly bigger chassis. This is the Pattern ANL90, and in fact produced in two versions, the 60 and the 90. The 60 had a 6mm mortar at the time.
What you're seeing in terms of the armour package is flat bar armour. The boxes you can see, there's a white and green on the sides of the vehicle. They are ERA armour, explosive reactive armour, and below that on the side is passive armour. So it's had a lot of armour upgrades. And what you can see as well is on the armament. This is on the 432. We've got a Select Enforcer, remote control weapon station. This can be fitted with a gym.
And basically this is the one of the issues we talked about, and I've forgotten if it was earlier today or yesterday, the fact they've got L stickers at the back. This is where driver training goes on, and it sounds a bit daft, but do walk around the roads around here. When you go up behind the tank and it's got an L sticker on, it means exactly the same as it does when you're driving or taking your test for a car. So number one is give it plenty of room, because the driver can see diddly squat. If he turns left or right, Y for NATO, and the British Army, you'll see rubber tramp pads on all the vehicles so we don't rip up the roads. If you look at that Russian T-72 aggressive track, they don't give a monkeys if it rips up the tarmac.
From the 1980s. This vehicle now is going to be replacing the CVRT Scimitar, the reconnaissance role. It fits in really well with our reconnaissance role as in CVRT Scimitar. You'd have to carry a spare.
And they're going to be replaced by a wheeled version called Boxer, but the Army's got a use, as Chris just said, they'll be using these for reconnaissance as we wait, fingers crossed, for this new vehicle, Ajax. It's coming along, we've got a number of problems at the moment, so these, I've got a suspicion, will be still seen around for a fair few years to come.
Yeah, the options are there. It's not as if we're down vehicles or we can Just point on
The Treasury gave a specific fund of money to the British military to buy kit that was going to be needed for Afghanistan and Iraq. And these are one of the vehicles that resulted from that. The first vehicle, the Foxhound, and of course behind it, coming on the Mastiff. So tell us about Foxhound.
Well, Foxhound is a marvel of engineering. It uses all sorts of state-of-the-art technology. It takes a lot of information, a lot of engineering from Formula 1 teams. The chassis is one piece of course material. Notice
Those cages are to trap rocket-propelled grenades. They're designed in a certain manner, and the idea is if you can stop that hitting and detonating your main armour, that means these hollow charges. Think of these RPG-7s, rocket-propelled grenades, and you'll see those on so many different vehicles. You've got up-armouring going on, depending on the nature of the conflict, going to bar armour, reactive armour, all sorts of ways of protecting extra layers. And obviously, with Afghanistan, we saw that rapid increase in
one of the biggest threats in those theatres were RPG-7s. They're all around the world, incredibly cheap, FREDJI equipment. Whenever we fight a battle in the target priority list, number one on the target priority list is the enemy bridging assets. Destroy the bridges, they can't cross rivers, they can't maneuver.
Now, if you go back to the First World War, the Battle of Cambrai, the British did a tank attack that advanced 3 miles.
Key parts, especially in NATO, if you look at traditional operating areas that we work with Germany, there's a lot of north-south rivers which we have to get across. As you mentioned, the Russians made a lot of their equipment amphibious or snorkel. That's got the downside. If you think if you make it amphibious, it needs to be light, therefore go straight through it. Yeah, we're looking at 7.62 RMP, so it will chew through that, which is pretty shocking by NATO standards.
So Titan, with any luck in our little demonstration in a moment, we're going to see this deployed.
Yeah, we're going to see this deployed bridge. We do it under 2 minutes. And it's got a 32-metre bridging crossing capability, which is pretty impressive. Suspension of the Challenger. So one of the best suspensions in war when it comes to main battle tanks. Instead of using
and again, these are big lungs trained up, and it's the training that makes a difference. Any modern army, you can have the best kit in the world, but if the guys don't know how to use it, nowadays the girls are certainly getting the armour corps as well.
Now we will see the Titan bridge layer approaching the riverbank, deploying in non-detected ways under the cover of the artillery. Direct fire covering core sites. number 10 bridge, 26 metres, launched under 2 minutes. Although it can carry 2 loads of 12 bridges, which can cover 13.5 metres. That's 90 seconds. Using special adapters for the bridges that can be laid in multiple combinations and be able to cross a river that's up to 5 metres deep and relatively fast flowing. Touching on what I said earlier, the Titan is based on the modified Challenger 2 chassis, therefore any armour upgrade to Challenger 2 jets this vehicle will get. So being a target priority, it's really good to have that level of protection when doing obstacle crossings. The Royal Engineers operate other armoured vehicles of these. It works in conjunction with the Trojan and the Terrier. Trojan being a minefield breaching platform, and Terrier being an armoured engineering vehicle. From here, the engineering call sign on the ground declare the crossing point open and begin to marshal across the friendly forces, starting with reconnaissance call signs.
Hello, this is Echo South. Bridges and crossing is now open. Over.
Now that the gap has been crossed, it's going to move on to the next phase of the operation. The vehicle we're seeing now is the Jackal. This reconnaissance platform will race ahead of the rest of the battle group to create something called the reconnaissance gap. This means a gap of approximately 5 kilometres between the reconnaissance vehicles and the lead elements of the battle group. This gap creates breathing space, allowing the battle group commander to formulate a plan if the enemy is sighted. The Jackal uses superior speed and stealth to get into position well launched and potentially draw position. Enemy is spotted, and a sentinel call will be sent to the battle group commander. From here, the battle group commander will take the information from the reconnaissance call signs and formulate a plan. In this example, a deliberate attack. This plan will be disseminated across the battle group so all platforms understand their mission and their part to play. When H hour arrives, the battle group commander orders the attack.
Hello, Shadow 160 H hour is 3, 2, 1, go, go, go.
First vehicle into the attack is the assaulting tanks. Their job is pure shock action. They drive towards the enemy position, causing as much damage and destruction as possible, concentrating their fire on enemy armoured vehicles and defensive positions. Once they have accomplished their mission, they push up to the flanks and provide fire support. It's the time for the armoured infantry. Mounted in their warrior infantry fighting vehicles, the armoured infantry, guided onto the position by an intimate support tank, clears the objective of any remaining forces. Warrior now carries out its primary role, delivering right from the top. all times dismount and carry out a section attack with the warrior acting as fire support. Section commander takes charge of the firefight and always leaving one foot on the ground, moves towards the enemy. Ladies and gentlemen, this now concludes the British Army display. We'll now carry out a number of laps of the arena for photographic opportunities. If you're interested in any of the vehicles or roles you've seen today, please search Army Jobs for information. You can also go to the car park where the Royal Army Corps recruiting team is. Also, there's a number of charities there. If you want to feel like being generous, there's a charity you can donate to. Thank you very much indeed for staying with us, and hopefully you've really enjoyed the live action. Just one thing to mention, the use of drones anywhere on the tank museum site is specifically prohibited.